Welcome, everybody. This is Dr. Adam Angreo with Heroes in the Field. And today, my guest is Tim Doherty of Doc's Healing Hives. How are you doing today, Tim?
Doing great. I already had the pleasure of working bees for 2 hours this morning, so it's a great way to start the day.
And you're down in Georgia, so I'm assuming that that was probably some pretty hot work right now.
No, we got lucky. We had a couple tornadoes and a storm come through yesterday. It was a nice 70 degrees, nice and cool.
Oh, that's actually really nice bee weather. So that's a
It is.
fantastic time to be working bees.
Yep.
Well, I'm really excited to have Tim here today. I was trying to think about this, before I came on today, Tim, and I think that we've known each other for about 10 years through the Farmer Veteran Coalition circles. And we've both been working bees and working with veterans. And I'm really excited to kind of talk to you today about what's going on with Doc's Healing Hives and some exciting news that we're going to have here at the end of this show. But uh, First, I always like to get started with just to let our kind of listeners know a little bit about you, Tim, and kind of where you came from, what you're doing, what your military experience was like, those
Sure.
types of things.
So I think, Adam, probably one of the reasons I got to know you early on is I'm a Spartan as well. So
That's
I'm a
right.
Michigan State graduate from 1993 and I got a degree in elementary education and I wanted to fly medevac. I've been in either started with the Michigan Army National Guard, went to the Georgia Army National, no, went to the reserves, Georgia Army National Guard, back to the reserves, and I did that for 32 years. But I found you through that Spartan connection after I deployed to Afghanistan in 2015, 2016. So it was I was excited to know that a fellow Spartan was leading the way in helping veterans heal through the vocation of beekeeping.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I do, and I do remember that you are a Spartan as well, and there's definitely a lot of us around in the agricultural spaces. MSU is a really great school for all of those types of things and so much more as well. So that's fantastic. So Tim, what? So I mean, you kind of started working with bees, and what kind of really brought you to where you are today with Doc's Healing Hives?
Sure. So like I said, I deployed to Afghanistan, and I was oddly, as a reservist, lieutenant colonel, the deputy surgeon for NSOC Alpha, and NSOC Alpha was NATO Special Operations Component Command Afghanistan. And my task there was we were going to be medevacing the Afghan special forces anymore. So as quickly as I could, set up a CASEVAC system using their special mission wing helicopters. And I did that, and I was there for a year. And in about the fourth month into my deployment, our base was actually attacked, and there were some soldiers that lost their lives and some guards, and that was kind of upsetting. And that evening, I also tore my left rotator cuff and my right bicep.
Hmm.
But I kind of knew if special operations was reaching back into the Army reserves to get a deputy surgeon, that there weren't a lot of fellas or ladies to fill my role if I went home. So I stayed. I stayed another 8 months. And then when I came home, I wanted to make sure that the Army was going to take care of my injuries. And they initially said they weren't because they didn't leave right away. They considered them injuries from old age, not from the actual incident.
Wow.
So I had the wonderful opportunity to challenge them for 4 months at a warrior transition base, what they're now SRU, soldier recovery units.
Yep.
So I was at this soldier recovery unit in Fort Stewart with absolutely nothing to do. And that, going from being deputy surgeon special operations, where I was on the road every day advising some other Afghan medical professional, and then come do nothing. I mean, I went and got my weed eater just so I could have something to do, and I was weed eating the grounds. The first opportunity I got to take leave, I went home up to Michigan to visit my sister in Howell. and I was still in a pretty dark space. The transition wasn't good. I was still angry about, the time our base was attacked and the loss of life there. And she said, why don't you work the bees with me today?
Mm.
And I did. And in that moment that I was working the bees, all that anger and that post trauma, it just stopped for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, this is what I want to do. This is, so I came back home and the timing was just right. I was able to go to UGA's, I'll just call it their bee school for the lack of better word, but it was their beekeeping course up at Young Harris. And it was like a 4-day seminar, and it was great. And then I think I got my first, and then I went to a beekeeping conference. And these were kind of the only ways I could get off the Warrior Transition Base was to go to some event that was helping me learn a new vocation, which was beekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to these different conferences, events, learned more. And then I got my first hive in September and started keeping bees. And I finally got my surgeries approved. So I got my hive in September and my surgeries were in October. And that next January is when I started Doc's Healing Hives because I knew how it helped me heal. And I just wanted to share that with others. And I remember running our first course in April. We had invited 22 vets, and it ended up being like 30 people because it seems like a lot of the time the veterans either want to bring their brother, their child, they're bringing someone with them. And it was such a pleasure to run that course and just so rewarding to be able to give 22 veterans the instruction, a bee colony, and a beehive. And just to see that it's like Christmas Day for them.
Yeah.
And I love doing it. And we did it. We partnered with Veterans Healing Farms in Hendersonville, North Carolina, to have a location instead of doing it at our church where the veterans could actually stay the night and it became a weekend course. Mm-hmm. And that was just wonderful. And then unfortunately, COVID came through and it was difficult to do anything that wasn't on an online platform.
Yeah.
And we are not an online platform. We are in-person instruction with individual support afterwards. So we went cold for like 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I kind of flipped the script where at the same time, I'm still an assistant principal in a high school as my actual job and doing this and also being in the Army Reserves. So the timing just kind of worked great. I was able to retire from the reserves or at least become a gray soldier in 2019. Mm-hmm. Then COVID came and there was a little bit of, there were 3 months where I didn't have to work too hard at work. And then after that, it was definitely working hard, managing COVID instruction and trying to get kids to come to school, people to get over their fear and come to work. But I began to build the Learning Center ahead of schedule. I was going to wait till I retired from the school system to build the Learning Center, which I'm so glad I didn't because I built it during COVID. And it's a small footprint. It's a 1,400 square foot cabin, which is our living space. And then off the backside, there's about a 700 square foot covered patio that's our instructional space. And so it took about 2 years to get it built. And then we were helping individual soldiers or veterans that had gone through the SHARE program. Mm-hmm. And the SHARE program is a program I went through. To go through that program, you have to have PTSD and a TBI. So it's ran by the Shepherd Center. So I would go to the Shepherd Center or they would come out to an educational garden. And I was working with these female and male veterans one-on-one, which was still rewarding, but it wasn't the instructional space that I was used to having as docs. Yeah. So our instructional space is complete. And we were approached by UGA to co-apply with them for a USDA grant. And that really is a game changer because now I don't have to really focus on fundraising to the same extreme as I did before. I would say prior to this grant, I would fund 85% of what was required. And then there would be some private friends and family that would make a donation to fund buying the bees, buying the equipment, paying for the food and the instructors. So it's been really exciting this year to have our learning space built, to be able to have veterans come here
Hmm.
and not have to worry so much about fundraising, where we can focus more on instruction and support. And we're going to have our next course. We ran one course in June, and that was our very first course. And we're going to run our next course the first weekend in September. And we're super excited to have 22 more slots for veterans to come and get, like I said at the beginning, they get instruction, they get bees, they get a hive, and just that connection to each other, which is it's I think what a lot of us miss
Hmm.
is just being able to be around our veteran buddies or people that are just like us. You know, they've got the same weird quirks, terrible sense of humor, same stories. It's almost like the modern version of a VFW or an American Legion. People just come and connect to each other and grab a new purpose or a new hobby.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we are really looking forward to September.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is that kind of you get people around that have shared experience together and some really powerful things can happen. And I was writing down some notes while you were chatting, and I mean a few of the things that really stick out. I mean, you've also seen that kind of familial connection, right? I mean, having you being, someone that was deployed, you understand going, somewhere for, 18 months or 2 years or however long the deployment is, you miss your family and you miss out on a lot of things that happen with your family. And that's something that we saw in Heroes to Hives really early on, was that folks were using beekeeping really as a way to kind of reconnect with their family members. And I mean,
Oh, they're individual family members.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
and I always come back to this one particular student I had many years ago who he was actually one of the inspirations for allowing kids to participate in our course. Was he had these daughters that were 8 and 11 years old and participating in the Heroes to Hives course. And when I would go out to his farm, his daughters were more excited about the bees than he was. And
Yeah.
I mean, but it brought them all together. I mean, he had been deployed to Iraq for 2 tours, and missed several years of their upbringing, and it really brought the family together. And it's an amazing thing to be able to see kind of these simple things like an insect, like a bee, that can
Yeah.
do so much for veterans and military families. It's really inspiring.
Well, and you really you used a word I didn't use, but it's truly what happens. And we do it in almost in three different levels here. We try to get them to reconnect to their family first.
Hmm.
Working with their family or just talking to their family about the bees or just sharing the honey. Then we try to get them to reconnect to their community,
Hmm.
through a local beekeepers association or going to the farmers markets with their honey or doing other educational talks. Now that they are, compared to someone who has no knowledge, they have an extreme amount of knowledge.
Hmm.
And then reconnecting with other veterans. It's like there's three different connections, actually the fourth, really, beekeepers.
Yeah.
It's four new units of people to help fill that void that we all feel when we come back home.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're coming back home and transitioning, I mean, I remember when I was transitioning out of the army, there's this like almost this feeling of isolation that,
Yes.
especially folks that, you know, these people you serve with, they become part of your family, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden it's just they're not there anymore, and it's really difficult. And so being able to come back and have these different pathways to connect with other people and not feel that isolation that's totally outside of the norm of what we think usually as veterans, right? I mean, most
Correct.
people are
Yeah.
not thinking about keeping bees when they're transitioning out of the military.
No, but it's so important because even prior to starting this, when I came home, I was in a dark space. But there are so many veterans, I think, because they're isolated, they end up in a dark space and end up killing themselves. And
Mhm.
that's really why I started the program is to, if I save one or we save one, then that's one less veteran that's killed himself. And there was a story that someone else shared with me that I had no idea we had had this impact on this individual. It was someone who had gone through the SHARE program, which meant that I connected him through their recreational therapist. The SHARE program's rec therapist would bring him to our instructional bee garden. We'd spend 2.5 hours there just talking about bees, going through an inspection. I'd give them first lessons of beekeeping book. They would go read that book. And if there was a further desire, then I would come to where they were. We would assemble a hive, and then I would give them the equipment they needed, and then give them money to buy a local colony of bees when they got back home.
Mhm.
And so this one guy named Sergio shared how beekeeping was what kept him from committing suicide with someone else, and then also reconnected him to his family and his own community. And
Wow.
I didn't even know I did that for Sergio. Sergio was telling somebody else another veteran that I met at the seminar. He's like, I know you. And I'm like, how do you know? You're the guy, Doc's Healing Hives. You did this for Sergio. And I was like, and he, shared the whole story. And it's just, it's, the Surgeon General did it in 1917 for a reason.
Mhm.
That's when this started. And teaching veterans that vocation of beekeeping is just, it's a good thing. So I'm glad you started it, and I'm happy to do it down here in Georgia.
Yeah, it's amazing to see all the huge network of organizations that have come up over the last 10 years around veterans and beekeeping. And you're right, it totally started, 1917, 1919, E.F. Phillips really taking the charge and instructing veterans and service members coming back from World War I on beekeeping really was kind of, it was one of the inspirations for me with Heroes to Hives. And when, coming back home and having kind of a very similar experience to you with bees is, bees being really like the catalyst that made me feel normal and made me feel like I was, not by myself and not having to
Yeah.
struggle through these things alone. It's absolutely the case, and we see that so many times with vets, and one of the things I think that's really going to be coming, in the kind of forefront of all of our minds as veterans that are working with honeybees is that Heroes to Hives and the VA have a study coming out at the end of this year that's being published that shows essentially that we can reduce depression and anxiety with interacting with bees as service members. So there's not only is it the anecdotal evidence that organizations like yours and ours see all the time, but there's actually now
Scientific.
real medical scientific evidence showing that this is actually happening. And having folks like you doing this it's imperative to our military communities to make sure that they're supported in ways that meet them where they are. A lot of folks,
Yes.
and I'm one of those folks that really struggles with therapists and going into like somewhere and being inside, being within four walls and having to spill your guts out to somebody. And for a lot of folks, that's a non-starter for a lot of folks. But
Sure.
it being in a bee yard and being able to calm down and focus and be present, a lot of people that just it matches up with their needs a lot better. And so it's amazing to hear your story about Sergio and what you were able to accomplish there.
Yeah.
So Tim, I wanted to ask you as we start to kind of wrap up here. So you have a course starting again here in September.
We do.
How, if someone wanted to be involved in that course, how would they go about doing that? And is it only Georgia veterans that are eligible for the course?
No, it's so in my dream, I win the lottery and I can build the $500,000 lodge that I want to house the veterans when they come here. When we ran our very first course, we invited everyone from all over the Southeast. We had someone from every state except for Mississippi. We had Texas, Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina, all came down to my church. And the course ran from 8 in the morning till 5 at night.
Wow.
And in my mind, they're all going to get a hotel room somewhere and stay there. or that drove up his RV. But in reality, I think all 18 of the 22 went home that night. And they did not show up the night before. They got up at whatever time in the morning to get there. And then they went through the whole course and then they went home.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, we got to change the way we do things. And so with the grant, we're allowed to have more participants, but we don't have any lodging established yet.
Okay.
And the grant requires every participant to put in 120 hours of continuing education. So with a lot of that taking place right here on our farm, we look at people that are within 90, an hour and a half of us.
Okay.
So if they can be in North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, but we really don't want them to come here because the way our course is set up now is they come Friday night, we build the hive, everybody, we talk about what the program is, we have a dinner, and then we do hive build. Everybody does a hive build. Everybody does it at a different pace. So some people get done really quick, some people it takes a little bit longer, and that includes building all their frames. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, everybody comes back and we have a full instruction until about 5 o'clock. Then we have dinner, and then they either can go home or they've got to wait around till 8:30 to make sure all their bees are back from flying around. Mm-hmm. So again, it's another long day. We don't want them driving 4 to 6 hours. So we're really focusing on the folks that are within an hour and a half or less of us, because we don't have that lodging built. Okay. If there's some donor out there that's listening to this and wants to help us raise money, or anybody that's good at fundraising or can direct us to the right grant, hey, we are all ears. Please go to our website and reach out to us, and we will be glad to start that next phase. We are very excited, and I didn't mention it. We ran our very first class and we had 7 applicants because we were a little slow in getting the marketing down. We've got about 30 for our next course, but we realized with the 7, half of them want to bring a family member. Mm-hmm. So that 7 is really 12. And our instructional space that was based on a high school classroom, we kind of figured out that veterans really aren't high school kids and they need a little more space. Yeah. So next week, we're pouring the concrete to increase the classroom from about 600 square feet to about 1,000 square feet. Nice. So we are super excited for that. And the builder, Benchmark Building, and I have to give him a shout out because he's doing it pretty much at cost, which awesome. Is a real generous donation. Here in Blue Ridge, where when you're building something, you might as well be building it in Grosse Pointe. It's extremely expensive. Yeah. So that should be done prior to the next course. And we're accepting applications up until August, we'll say 4th, because I promised we'd give everybody a month's notice. So they can go to our website, and there is a place that's at the very bottom. And I think it says apply. And if they can't find it, if they just reach out to me, send me an email, and they just simply apply it. It's a real simple 5-question application. We are probably going to do a more in-depth application just because we have more people than we do slots for this very first course. Okay, that sounds. And the website is Doc's Healing Hives. If you want to learn more, it's docshealinghives.org. You can follow us on Instagram. It's the same thing, Doc's Healing Hives. Facebook, same thing. We respond to stuff put on Instagram and emails the fastest. Okay. And what I'll Facebook do is just sort of like everything we post from Instagram just carries over to Facebook. Okay, that sounds great. And I will, in the notes here for the podcast show, you'll see that there's links to all of these, to docshealinghives.org, to Doc's Insta and Facebook as well.
Well, this has been really informative, Tim, and I wanted to kind of just wrap up today by making it a little bit of an announcement. Tim and I have been talking for years about about Docs coming on as a partner with Heroes to Hives, and we're going to be making that happen in 2025. So, veterans that are in the Southeast and in Georgia, in particular, will have an opportunity to do some hands-on work with Tim here coming up in 2025 as they come on with us at Heroes to Hive. So that's really exciting as we continue to expand out our network of on-ground partners around the country. So we're looking forward to having you come on, Tim, with Heroes to Hives. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Are there any last kind of thoughts or anything you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, yes, Adam, I want to say thank you for being my hero because
Oh,
you were the one that created this space for me to not do something exactly the same, but something similar. And you were my original hero. So thank you for being that guy.
well, I really appreciate that, Tim, very much. And likewise, the work that you're doing down in Georgia is so important. And we couldn't be more proud to have you coming on board with us at Heroes to Hives to continue that mission of supporting our veterans to be the next generation of American beekeeper and helping them heal through honeybees. So thank you so much for being with us today, Tim. Again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and all you're doing. And thanks for being with us on Heroes in the Field.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the collaboration. Take care.
Fantastic. And that is Tim Doherty from Doc's Healing Hives with us today on Heroes in the Field. This is Dr. Adam Ingrao signing off today. Have a great beekeeping day.